So I'm so glad to be here today. This is such an honor. I've wanted to talk about this with Hope for years. In fact, when I was a little girl, the first book that I found that made an impact on me was in college, and it was Hope's book. Because I was looking for something about loss, and I couldn't find anything. So thank God for Hope. Crazy that all these years later I would be up on stage doing this with someone who's meant so much to me in the world about loss. Oh, don't make me cry. So I want to talk about purpose and it being the second act of loss. How many people in here have lost a father or a mother? 1 in 3 of us. So we're not alone. We're all together in here. 75% of us will go through a very traumatic event in our life, like the loss of a parent. In 1980, there were 2 psychologists at the University of North Carolina that decided to study trauma and the effects of it on how it affects us as we go through life. And they found something very interesting, that there are 4 dynamic and compelling ways that trauma affects us. The first being that it gives us greater inner strength. The second, that it brings us closer to family and friends. The third is that we get more meaning out of life. And the fourth being that it could be the catalyst to find the purpose in your life, which is what happened to me. My name's Denna, and I'm a fatherless daughter expert. I help people take their pain, turn it into power, and then something beautiful, like purpose. When I was 13 years old, my father was murdered. To this day, we don't know who did it or why. It was the defining moment in my life. Fear set in, and I quit dreaming. Think about when you're 13 years old, what you're dreaming about, what college is going to be like, who you're going to spend the night with that weekend, what friends you're going to go to football games with, or gymnastics. And for me, I stopped everything. Fear took over, and my dream stopped. It was hard. It's something that I didn't know what to do. And so I looked at all the adults around me and thought, what do I do? So I decided I'll emulate them and I'll move on. That's what I'll do. And I tried. Until I got to my father's funeral. That's a lot. And I remember coming back home from the funeral, and I was in the backseat of my mom's car, which is a car I hated. It was a Gremlin. Anybody remember that car? The worst car ever. There's like a little triangle window in the back seat. And I had my head leaning on the window, and my mom and my brother were in the front seat, and I was pissed off. I had already had kind of a rough life at that point, and I started arguing with God consciously. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Why did you do this to him? My life is over. And I was just going at it with him in my head. Everybody thought I was fine, but I was in the back of my mind just really giving it to him. And I heard his voice. Not like George Burns, but I heard his voice. And he said, his death will not be in vain. You'll do something beautiful from it. I didn't know what that meant, but it gave me some solace. I felt that there was something bigger for me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something out there for me. It would take me another 15 years to figure that out. That's for sure. I went through life in a lot of pain, very confused, rushing through life, trying to get by, trying to act as though nothing was wrong with me. I, like Cynthia and everyone else before me, didn't know anyone. There was no one in school and middle school that's like, hey, my dad died, right? For me, I lost my father twice. So the first time I was 3 and my parents divorced. He then died when I was 13. I like to define fatherlessness because a lot of people think father loss means he passed away. It's not true. 1 in 3 of us obviously lose our father, but sometimes it's to abandonment, divorce, addiction, trauma. many ways that we lose our parents or we lose our father. In our society, father loss is not looked at as the same as mother loss. Many times fathers choose to leave, or they're alienated, or there's reasons that they're not in a person's life. In those two subsets of me losing my father to both death and divorce, I try to split those into two camps, and that's what I've done in my research. So the first camp being death. If you lost your father to death, you seem to idealize him. You miss him, you're the saddest. You really go through life with a broken heart. And you don't want to talk about it, you deny it. Even though it's killing you, it's right under the surface, you just keep pressing on. For those of us who have dealt with the loss of our father due to divorce or abandonment, we're a little angrier. We seem to seek attention from the opposite sex. We buck authority. And we want to know why. And we're very critical of our fathers. Because I had both things going on, I was a little bit of a mess. By the time I was 27 years old, I was depressed, divorced, and hopeless. Although I'm the one who chose to leave my marriage, my biggest fear was re-abandonment. That's our currency, fear, being left alone. And although I was running, because that is what I had done for 27 years, being alone and choosing that was very hard for me. I moved to another state, and I ran as fast as I could go till I really couldn't go anywhere else. And I remember waking up in my bedroom, and I had these 3-bay windows, and the light was coming in, and I thought, I cannot take another day. I can't let this light come in. I can't watch another show. I just don't want to go on. I wasn't suicidal. I was just hopeless. And so what I did is I took my big comforter down blanket, and I went into my big walk-in closet, well, big enough, and I got the comforter and I stuffed it under the crack of the door so that I could stay in the dark, because I just didn't want to deal. I didn't want to take any medication. You know, I'm kind of a lightweight, so I was like, I'll just go back to sleep. And I laid there in the dark, again, arguing with God. It was something I did a lot, subconsciously. I didn't tell anyone else, but I was pissed off. I've been pissed off for a lot of years. So I was yelling and saying, what am I doing? Why do you have me here? I'm never going to get a family. I'm never going to get over this. I don't relate. I don't know what's going on in my world. And I got very quiet, and I heard purpose. And I thought, what? And he said, you're going to make something beautiful out of this, remember? And it was like my whole world opened up. I could not believe that. I didn't even remember that from the funeral. And I started having these recollections of him talking to me, and he'd kind of been there with me my whole life. So I got up, and I got to work. I went back, got into some therapy. My mom took me one time after my dad died, and the therapist said I was fine. So I went back to therapy. I mean, of course, I'm great. I went back to therapy, and I did a deep dive. I saw 2 therapists, an inner child therapist and an adult therapist. In fact, the inner child therapist told me that, he said, what do you miss the most about your dad? And of course, I was scared to talk about it, and I was like, he never came to any of my recitals. And he said, well, go get a tutu and come in and you can put on a recital. And I'm like, I'm done with inner child therapy. I'm good. I'm good. But I did a lot of work. And I looked in bookstores. I went to libraries, and I dug around for who am I? Who am I as a fatherless daughter? Why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I confused? Why can't I get it right in the relationship department? Why do I have mommy guilt? Why do I wish my mom had chose someone different? Why didn't they stay married? I had all these thoughts roaming through my head that I could not put together. So I decided to start doing my own research. I put together both quantitative and qualitative research. I interviewed over 10,000 women in 10 years. I found out what made people tick emotionally, mentally, physically, how it was all interconnected. And I decided that in order to heal, if you lose your father at a young age, you have to go back developmentally where you lost your father. So I wanted every person who picked up the book to be able to go back to where they were and figure themselves out all the way through. So I put everything together, compiled it in a book, the Fatherless Daughter Project. It took me many years to get to that point. And then I decided, well, how about somebody doesn't read a book? I got to help everybody, so I shot a documentary. And then I thought I got to do more, so I started 501c, and I started the Fatherless Daughter Project movement. Some would call it obsession. My husband would probably say I'm obsessed. And I thought, how can I help other people? Because I felt so alive. I felt so sure of myself finally. How can I get other people to take their hardships, take the pain, turn it into power, into something beautiful? Because the cool thing is, we all have purpose. We all have a second act. We're not supposed to let the loss define us. As Hope said, it's our story, it evolves. We're supposed to figure out who we are and what we're supposed to do about it, just like the psychologist told us. So what I know for sure is that the pain doesn't go away. We accept labels such as emotionally unstable, depressed, anxiety, and everything else society tells us because we keep it quiet because we're fearful of re-abandonment. And so we walk around in pain, lost. And then because we're so scared to feel the pain again and to walk away abandoned again, we stay in bad relationships. We become workaholics. We isolate ourselves. Why? You're not supposed to be stuck in purgatory. Many people before me, before any other person that talks about loss or any issue, many people before me have done big things with loss. Mother Teresa, her father died when she was 7 years old. He died from poisoning, and while he was suffering, she said, how about if suffering is a gift? And she took that gift and she said, I'm going to go help the people. That's what I'm going to do with my life. She was canonized as a saint 1 year after she died. And then we got President Barack Obama, fatherless. His dad left when he was young, and he saw him one time before he died when he was 21 years old. Instead of letting that pain of abandonment take him in a chaotic descent, he decided, what can I do? How can I take this power and help make other people powerful? We all know what his second act was. The third person is Supreme Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Barack Obama appointed her. Her father was an alcoholic. She says that she remembers right before he died, when she was 9 years old, that he came in drunk to her house and started arguing with her mom. And she said, I knew right then and there he was lying. And that's how she used her power. She turned it into becoming the first Hispanic Supreme Court Justice. So what I would say to you today is, don't let the loss define you. Don't. You could start today. Yes, you should feel the loss. Yes, it's painful. It's still painful for me. I could cry easily right now, believe me. But what are you going to do with that loss, and how are you going to redefine yourself? So I'm going to end with one last thing, and it's one final question. What will your second act be? Thanks.